Happy birthday to George Washington for this week's edition of Monday with the Mayor. And we're here with Terry Seitz. He's not quite George Washington, but he is a mayor.
And I'm not ever, nor have I ever talked about being George Washington. What a great man. Abe Lincoln's birthday was last week also, so that's why it's President's Day, as we have today, and we observe that in our country. And I think we acknowledge all our leaders, presidents of all sorts, and in a smaller scale, it is quite an honor to be an elected official serving the public. I never envisioned my life of doing this, of leading to this, but it's a privilege to be the mayor of Jasper.
Absolutely. Moving ahead now, economic development. Let's talk some economic development.
That's a big picture. You know, we have, in the last 3 years, I look back because it seems like they've passed so much, and you go like, well, for me, I have projects as the mayor that are on my horizon that maybe are still just in my head. But there have been a great amount of accomplishments, and these are not accomplishments of the mayor. These are accomplishments of city, other elected officials, our boards, and the citizens who help drive that. So I want to make sure that this is not a bragging point. There are two things right off the bat that I'm very proud of. When I came into office, the temperament of the citizens of Jasper was a very contentious one. We had just come through and still we're in the power plant discussion and concerns, and we inherited that. It was not so much the business side of it, but the tone and attitude was a lot different than what it is today. We worked very hard to overcome any concerns about openness in the city government, whether or not they were valid. We just took an approach of being as open as possible, and then also to change a positive, put the positive and a reason to be positive back into the citizens again. And fundamentally, I stand by that as truly the one thing that I personally am proud of, because that's something that we directed from day one, and that's our approach. I find it very interesting that the more public you are in your decision-making process, sometimes the more contentious that gets, because people are finding out about things. And some of the processes we go through, some of the, for TIF, for example, it's a very deep discussion that probably is not very well understood even today. We felt we understood that very well, but we took 9 months to do what some city governments do in a month, and what we could have by law do in a month. We took that long to allow full public input, but that all stemmed from what was happening when I took office. I'm very proud of that. The downtown Jasper Riverfront Master Plan is another source of pride, and you know what? The big fear I have is that it gets a little cold and we don't technically have the implementation of that. But I can also say that the implementation for doing work in downtown was presented as part of the annual budgetary process last July. Some members of the council were not comfortable with where the detail was or what they saw in the budget hearing, and they kicked it down the road and said, we want more detail, we're willing to reappropriate dollars. We got into the TIF and sidetracked that a little bit. We have submitted some dollars and cents. We know we have budget to be able to do this in reserve, and we're going to get that accomplished. It has taken just a little longer time, and it also, even when it starts, will need to be planned very well. But we want to focus on downtown. I believe we can also help the park department as they go to the next stages of the parkland. And we can do this also from reserve funds that we have. We want to use economic development income dollars only. We have a reserve fund. We have annual revenue coming in. We also will continue to fund with those economic development dollars the taxes collected, our roads and sidewalks. We put 35 roughly to 40% of our economic development tax dollars every year into streets and sidewalks. Do you know what the city of Jasper's repaving budget is this year from all sources? Go ahead.
No.
$1.8 million. That's using paving, that's using, again, revenue from general fund, that's using $625,000 of edit monies. Do you know what the city of Evansville's repaving budget is this year?
Probably a little bit more.
$1.8 million. So when you're looking at what we're doing in that infrastructure, that's fine. And we're using edit funds for that, and we have for years. Mayor Schmidt and I both have done that. However, I have a belief that if we're collecting those tax dollars, we're not a savings account. There's a fine line between having reserve funds, and there's a fine line at investing those dollars. Some people may call that spending, but you know what? We're collecting your tax dollars. We need to do things with that. The downtown project and the parklands, I believe, are two areas. What we'll loop into that is if there is interest and things that need to be parlayed in related to the guidance of doing something involving Jasper Cabinet and or Who's Your Desk. Things that would leverage private investment in those. The roadway, street area, stormwater in front of Jasper Cabinet that could benefit an owner. Helping the arts perhaps be a part of the Who's Your Desk, but that could leverage in a private investment of housing. Those are the things where we're exploring now, and we still have to have some funding for that. We do. There's always a potential of bonding, but we do have cash to make these things work. It's getting it into the right reappropriation form. We know that also the Square project, if that is undertaken, is going to be a 100-year project underneath the surface. There's no use to do things on top of the surface because you're taking concrete out. We have water lines below the square that we know are 100 years old. Why wouldn't we replace them? Well, that involves some utility money. So this becomes a significant project. Our electric department we determined in the downtown to sustain the lighting structures we have because we have an investment. We painted those, we made them LED lights and have heard very good response from that. We're going to save a significant amount of money in electricity for that lighting, but we're not going to install new lighting even if we go through the downtown project. So we've already addressed some of this. So long story short, when I hear that, Mayor, are you going to get something done in economic development, I know it is that master plan call for downtown. We were ready to do that last July. As we had no funding put to it at that time or no authorization of funding, we know the dollars are there. It's been work that we have to do to make sure and return that to the council in a form that is comfortable for them to look at. And I believe there is support from the council. I'm not saying there's not support. The budget just at that time felt that was not appropriate to do for whatever reason. So that's the broad economic development picture. I see some funding from the civil city to help the park in the parklands. We've already appropriated $300,000 from park reserve funds for the next step there. And then the downtown we can do. And I think we will still have in the black funding for streets and roads based on all the reports I've got that we can do all this and still have some options on Who's Your Desk and Jasper Cabinet as perhaps public and private interest in those buildings goes forward. It's pretty comforting to me, Bradford, to be able to do this, but it's very hard to explain in short sound bites.
Mm-hmm. That's why we have 5-minute freeform shows.
Thank you.
So that's been this week's edition of Monday with the Mayor. Happy birthday once again to George Washington. We'll be back after this.